Alright, this is the small book that will be in my shop, and I can never remember numbers. It's 4.5, 4.25 by almost 7 inches. And here's the spine with a pretty gold writing. The lyrics and shorter poems of Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it's even got this little label, very vintage label from the library. And there's an embossed emblem from the publisher in the center, which I rubbed with Inca Gold paint paste, and around the edges also. The closure is just this seam binding tied around it. Has 2 signatures, and it has the original library label inside, and the end paper is very pretty. There's a piece of crocheted trim here. This is the same quote that was in the other book. It actually came from this book. And here's the piece of fiber that will be listed in my shop at some point. I'm not sure when I'll get it in there. These are from Vintage Books, and a postage stamp. They're just stitched together as a collage and then glued on. There's a vintage ticket and a vintage milk bottle cap, and a vintage snap card. It says Giggle Giggle, or Gertie Giggle, and a probe letter. Probe game. This is a vintage billhead paper that I found at a flea market. This is also from a flea market, Sailor's Portland Cements, and I just made this little border of hearts stitched onto this brown paper, and it's stapled on here. There's a stamp there, and these are the little tabs that I made with my Cricut. There's a stamp there, and a postage stamp there from Czechoslovakia, I think. Polish songbook, some fabric and lace. This is a card from Victoria Designs. A vintage ticket there is used as the pull tab, and there is a vintage gift sticker and vintage song page. And there's a little postage stamp and a little piece that I cut out from some scrapbook paper. And inside this little pocket is the cover page for this book with the beautiful designs. Nice paper, and a vintage prescription and a vintage playing card. You'll notice many of the same elements in both of these books. This is vintage ledger paper. This is not vintage. And this is from a vintage book about antiques or collectibles. And this is the other side of that page was blank, so you can journal on that, and I just did a little stamping. There's some hearts on the ends of the strings. And there's a vintage sticker again, and a price tag, sale price tag that I got from Denise's shop, A Tattered Dream. One of the offcuts of the paper, scrapbook paper, and a vintage Meredith Bottling Works receipt, and a vintage sorry card. And as I said in the other video, this is made from a desk calendar page that is not vintage. It's 1996, and I just took one of the pages and folded it up and stitched all the way around it to form a pocket there. And there's another probe card in there. And this is an index card with a tab that I made, and it's covered with music paper from a vintage songbook. And there's one of those labels that I purchased from an Etsy seller, Peppermint Cordial, and I'll try to find out which seller I bought that from and link it below. This is just a little fabric tab there. This is vintage wallpaper. Thought that was beautiful. I cut this little piece out and glued it on as a pocket, and there's a couple more probe cards in there. There's a postage stamp. It says Progress in Electronics. This is a stamp. Make every day extraordinary. This one has some seam binding and a vintage rose playing card stitched on. Here's a piece of the leftover canvas from this binding. Somebody, let me see, it was Susan Broussard that sent me a Flowish journal that had this, a sizable piece of canvas wrapped around the front of it. And I used it to cover the binding of 3 junk journals, Harry Potter junk journals, which I made the video, but I haven't posted it yet because they're Christmas presents. So by the time you see this, they may have already been posted. Anyway, I had another narrower piece. It was too small for a Harry Potter book, and I put it on here. And I still had a scrap left, so I stitched all around it to keep it from fraying and stamped on it and made it a pocket. And there is a vintage gift sticker there. This is a free printable from Ephemera's Vintage Garden. Or, no, I don't think it is a free one. I think it's one I purchased from Tsunami Rose. And it's printed on parchment paper, so I didn't back it on anything, but I didn't put a tie through it because it would tear. And this is something that I made on craft cardstock. Second signature has this gorgeous end paper picture. It's Art Nouveau, kind of. And another piece of that fiber. Some more collage of vintage pieces, another wallpaper butterfly. And this is not a vintage ticket, but I purchased it from the same seller that I got the pink vintage tickets from. They have these in, I got this mint green and yellow, and there are other colors too. This is Sailor's Portland cement with an allium plant stamped on it and stapled. Vintage Clue score sheet. There's another stamp of a vintage lady. American Music postage stamp. This is vintage ledger and vintage notebook paper. Polish songbook, piece of fabric and lace. And here's one of the Victoria Designs cards. Another index card with a ticket as a tab pull and a little vintage sticker with a little piece of music behind it. This came from, looks like a vintage yearbook, and someone sent that to me. So I just cut out a couple of the cute little kids and stitched them on with a piece of seam binding and a vintage ticket. It says Vincent's, Berwick, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure where that seller lived, where I got this ticket from. It was from Etsy, but I live in Pennsylvania. I don't know where Berwick is. I'll have to look it up. Here's from the Masterpiece card game. I think that's Marc Chagall. Yeah, it is. So there, you got a piece of art in here. And a vintage, or not vintage. It is not vintage. It's a coffee-dyed file folder that I cut with my Big Shot into a Rolodex card. This is vintage. Here's another page from that book, vintage book on antiques. Here's the inside. Another Victoria Designs card. And I stamped that definition. And there's another pocket there with a little tag. I'm not sure. This might be from Victoria Designs too. Another probe card and an index card with music on it and a tab that I made. Another collage with the Lotto. Well, it's the first collage like this in this book. The other book has it too. Lotto card and a botanical image from a vintage book. Some gathered fabric. And here's that lawyer's stamp again with this other modern stamp that I have. And again, the Walter Chaffee hardware store from Ulster, Pennsylvania. Vintage receipt and another. Here's the other American Legion ticket that I have. And a stamp, postage stamp there. And then a fabric pocket and another of these tags that may have come from Denise's shop. And another tag that I cut from patterned cardstock. And this is a vintage library pocket with some fabric or coffee dyed pattern paper on it, and another stamp from Czechoslovakia, and a library card. It only got taken out once, and that was in 2001. It was from my church library. Okay, so these are the two little books that I just completed. This one is for Renee. This one is going in my shop, which I will link below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.